Good. It still works. What is up, everybody? This is Jay, aka MultimediaJay. Oh, man. What a darn week. Overtime all over the place for the 9-to-5ers. Basically, there are different ways in which the building has been getting pummeled every single week. So we've been pummeled 2 weeks in a row, and this time we got pummeled all the way to almost, well, closer to 50 hours this week. So there were several nights with all the overtime going on where I just came home, blankly stared at the screen, and then just went to bed because I didn't feel like doing anything. So one of those things where you come home and you say to yourself, have I really just spent over half of my waking hours in a day in my life doing that? And, you know, just was like, with this, man. I'm glad I went and I recorded my YouTube video over the weekend. I do have a video to work. I have several videos to work on, actually. I'm back in the position I was a couple of weeks ago. There is stuff that is sitting new in the box here at Jay's Geek House that needs to be installed, tinkered with, worked with, etc. And now Microsoft has announced the successor to Windows 10, Windows 11, which Windows 10 was supposed to be the final version of Windows. When it first came out, people were talking about, Microsoft was talking about how Windows 10 was going to be like what happened with OS 10 with on the Apple side of things with the Macs. So it was supposed to be the final version of Windows, and it'd just be OS patches afterwards. That way the security of running an old Windows OS wasn't as big of a thing with this sort of stuff. But it's just one of those things where I don't know. Always expect companies to change their minds as seasons change. So, for example, Windows XP was pretty darn good, but there were some issues with XP because it was made for a computing world that had none of the always-on type stuff that we have today, with broadband being a lot more mainstream. Then Windows 7 was basically Windows Vista finally having been gotten right, and then Windows 10 was basically Windows 8 having finally been gotten right. So hopefully Microsoft breaks the pattern of every other release of Windows being garbage with Windows 11. So otherwise, I don't know what the business world's gonna. Well, it's the business world that has the Windows licenses a lot these days. So if it ticks off the business world, it probably won't make it into Windows. So I don't know. We'll figure that out at some other time. Tonight I have alerts paused, and I actually am not going to read off the alerts from the people that sub to my channel between shows. We'll save that for the next stream that I do. That's about something that's more in line with what I want this channel to be about, as opposed to yet another discussion about the pandemic. Yeah, the pandemic. Oh boy. I can't take 2 steps through any news coverage of any sort these days without reading something about the pandemic. And now, in today's day and age, I'm hearing about Delta all over the place. And I'm seeing, how Delta is making the rounds in this country. Of course, I saw what it did to India. I saw the news footage of the overcrowded hospitals, the oxygen shortages, and people crying because their loved ones died in the hospital right before their very eyes. It's a terrible, terrible thing to watch. And it's just, that was the nightmare situation that America's politicians were very worried about, that the hospitals were so overloaded that they wound up having to triage care. And it's not fun when, for some arbitrary reason, it is decided that you're going to be left there and not actually treated because there just isn't enough resources to properly treat you. So the medical staff is making decisions as to who lives or dies. It's not what you want to be in if you're having trouble breathing because of one of the worst respiratory blah-blahs of the century and a once-in-a-century pandemic here. So we've seen what this thing can do over in India. And now we got to take a look at what it's going to do here in the United States. Now, previously, I mentioned COVIDiot plague, which sounds a little insensitive, but fundamentally, unless you're one of those people who medically cannot get vaccinated, and you should be extremely careful if you are, by the way, if you're one of those people who's snubbing the vaccine while other people can't take it or can't get it, then yeah, this is going to be the sort of thing where you live on the edge a little too long and it catches up to you, because Delta is basically picking up where the original virus left off with regards to these variants and things like that. It is getting the news coverage that it is getting for a reason, and it is not scare tactics. We're talking about evolution that's in play here. This thing is fighting back against our efforts to contain it. And I don't get why why it has to be such a strange foreign concept that we can be at war with something microscopic. I don't get why people can't just understand we got to fight this thing and win, not argue amongst each other and whatnot. And that the vaccine, for example, represents a long missing element of our response to it that we previously didn't have. And quite frankly, it's a major improvement to finally have a vaccine for this thing. For one brief, ugly moment, for the better part of a year, the Western world got to see what happens when we get knocked down a few pegs. I mean, I've grown up with vaccines for all kinds of things. Childhood vaccines, MMR, vaccines you have to get when you're 12 years old, vaccines you have to get when you're going off to college. I mean, I've grown up with vaccinations being a thing. Except for one, chicken pox. I had chicken pox the regular way as a kid because there wasn't a vaccine for it yet. Now if I ever get immunocompromised or something later in life, I can develop shingles because of it. Boy, wouldn't it have been nice if there could have been a chicken pox vaccine when I was little, but there wasn't. This is what happens when you see technology march forward like this. Sometimes you just get a little jealous, or, well, you have a hard time not getting jealous because you're like, wow, people have such great things nowadays that I didn't have earlier. So I often wonder that about some of my fellow YouTubers who are in their 30s heading towards 40, got some gray hairs poking around, and they see all these younger millennials that are successful at, on live streams and live streaming platforms, things like that. And you're like, man, if this was around when I was getting started, I probably could have done just as well. How unfortunate that I was born a decade too early or something like that. But I imagine there's probably some streamer on Twitch somewhere or something. I often wonder if Ginny has this thing with her parents where you have a streamer, their older parents don't understand what they're doing at first, but they come around and they start to notice, oh, wait, yeah, there is something cool to this. I wonder how many of those parents in their 40s and 50s wish they could have had that when they were that age. So it's a thing, you see technology move forward, and maybe you just wish you had it earlier. Your mind when you're older starts playing what if games with this sort of thing. Like, what if this technology was around when I was younger? Or what if I could have had this in my prime or something along those lines? But in this case, the entire timetable got truncated down to less than a year. So here's the thing. For a little bit of a not so good 2020, as we remember it, the Western world got to get knocked down a peg when we had something going around that we had no vaccine for. It was so new, as hinted at by the way it was referred to, the novel coronavirus back in the beginning of this thing. So we didn't have a vaccine, so we got to experience what life was like in the pre-vaccine days when we couldn't do anything about something. So, except we actually knew enough to realize we needed a vaccine. It wasn't like in the old days where nobody would really know what to do, and so people would randomly come down with stuff as people tried all kinds of not-so-scientific ways of preventing or treating or whatever any ailment that was tearing up the population at large. It wasn't like that. We knew we needed a vaccine but didn't have one. So even in a sense, our year of being stuck being primitive about this was something that was still better than what we would have had in centuries gone by, because we knew how to counter this thing and we knew what we had to do. We just didn't have it done yet. So, of course, we had the economy taking a hit, non-essential workers getting laid off, things along those lines, masks, social distancing. We had all these things because that was all we had. We didn't have the vaccine that we knew we needed. And now here it is. There's a glut of supply here in the United States, and we have people who range from understandably nervous about the vaccine hesitant, to full-on anti-vaxxer, freeloading off of other people's efforts to try and contain this thing because some partial amount of herd immunity can benefit them depending on where they live. It's like those people in Connecticut, those Republicans that live in Connecticut, yes, they exist, who cry about all the social programs that Connecticut has while benefiting from them in some way, or being eligible for them in some way. It's one of those things, You know, and of course, the Northeast is known for being maker states instead of taker states when it comes to federal dollars, sending more money to Washington than we take back for ourselves. So some people have joked about maybe we should stop being so generous if people are going to complain about us so much. But that's a totally different discussion. When it comes to the vaccine and everything, at this point, what variant is it going to take to get some of these people to understand where us tech folks are coming from with regards to this? Especially when there's a ramp-up period for the benefit that you're going to get from the vaccine. That's the thing. Delta. Holy crap. Let me just show you a little something here. Let's go to browser. Will it link up automatically? Nah, security thing. And it still says Avast Secure. So let's link this up to @MultimediaJay on Twitter. So this is the a little bit scuffed, but oh well. This is COVID Act Now, covidactnow.org, by the way. This is COVID Act Now's, let me get my pointer back by getting over to the window instead of doing everything through OBS. This is COVID Act Now, click, there we go. This is COVID Act Now's county map, which I find a lot more useful than the state map because the geographical size of the states can throw off the results, things like that. My question now with regards to where the heck this thing is doing its thing is, where's Delta? And so it's kind of like a Where's Waldo thing, but with the darn pandemic. Except Nebraska apparently doesn't have data by county, so they're grayed out. But for the entire rest of the country, can you spot where Delta is? Pretty much anywhere there's a lot of red. I mean, the Delta outbreaks among the less vaccinated parts of the country are basically, you know, anywhere the country looks like it's bleeding. That's where, so southwestern Missouri is the big one. Read about some stuff going on in Wyoming, also Guadalupe County, New Mexico. And I'm sure if I did some digging on some of these other places that are turning red, I could probably find some news story at some point about, oh yeah, well there's this outbreak of Delta here, this outbreak of Delta there, etc. So you could say, with some of the numbers suddenly shooting way up, like Greene County, Missouri, or better yet, the double outbreak that took place in Knox County, Kentucky earlier, which seems to have been contained a bit. You could say with what's gone on with these sudden jumps in numbers that it's some fluke of the numbers, some fluke of the mathematics. Like, for example, a small town jumping way up in cases per 100 grand because a bunch of people in the town get the virus all at once. But that's the reason why it's scaled. I've heard that a lot with regards to some of the counter arguments to the vaccine. They're saying, well, a lot of these are scare tactics used by government to blah, blah, blah. But the reason why everything's scaled per 100K is to eliminate population as a factor. Otherwise, it would look like our cities were getting all torn up by the virus, when in reality, our cities just have more people. So when you factor out population size, like, for example, out in the country, there is baked in social distancing. In little hick towns like where I live, there's baked in social distancing because there's less people around. We should not have large amounts of people getting COVID out in the country, but it's been that way before. Last winter, Connecticut was actually last winter. Do I have my pointer? Yeah, there it is. I just can't see it on the tiny preview. Last winter, Connecticut actually turned red. Blue state, folks wearing masks, social distancing, all this stuff. Connecticut turned red like much of the rest of the country last winter during that last surge before the vaccine was rolled out. So that's the thing. Meaning we all kind of sucked at containing this thing when the country was turning red. No matter what. So whether you're in the city, in the country, etc., when you factor out the size of the local population, when you factor that out, the size of the local population, we all did miserably last winter. And so you can say, well, yeah, smaller towns, it takes less cases. The truth of the matter is, though, with regards to these numbers, that there's only one number that matters, and it is the reason why the stream title tonight is what it is. And the reason why I'm stopping all the other stream engagement, like alerts and catching up on who subbed and everything, because this is just a special discussion because I'm just so passionate about this. I would have discussed this earlier in the week, but were it not for all the overtime that was going on with the 9-to-5ers. So, could even turn off chat if I wanted to, and people are like, oh, he's recording a YouTube video by streaming. Well, it's doable on this platform. You can actually have unlisted and private streams on here and then turn them public afterwards. So if I ever wanted to go 100% record a discussion video as a stream, I could do that. It's actually a really crude way of making YouTube videos if I wanted to use OBS to actually create YouTube videos. If I got it down pat when to hit the buttons to change the scenes, or program it in like PowerPoint or something, or make a PowerPoint animation and record it directly into YouTube by streaming it to nobody, turning off the chat or something. It's all your imagination and how you think about using these tools. But yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you can talk about population density and everything and stuff, but fundamentally, though, the reason why we are here tonight is because of the one rule that matters if you're not vaccinated right now, as Delta continues to make parts of the country bleed on this map, like southwestern Missouri. There's only one rule that matters right now, folks, and it is this. Wrong person, wrong place, wrong time, COVID. It sounds like a parody of that classic palindrome thing that can be spelled the same forwards and backwards, a man, a plan, a canal, Panama, and that's because it's a real easy thing to remember. Up to this point, I've talked about 2 rules for dealing with this pandemic. 1, you don't know who has this thing because it has a 1-week incubation period. Anybody who's not protected against this virus can be infected and not know it yet and give it to a bunch of people before they develop symptoms. 2, you don't know what this thing is going to do to you if you get it. Those have been my traditional 2 rules when it comes to the pandemic. Rule number 2 in particular is the big one, because you could have the sniffles from COVID. You could be asymptomatic, or you could end up in the hospital. You could end up on a ventilator. You could die from this thing, or you could wish you did die from this thing because you are messed up for a long period of time, if not the rest of your life afterwards. You could end up on oxygen. You could end up with lung damage. You can end up with cardiovascular complications. This thing made patients in Massachusetts have strokes in their 30s because of blood clots. Lady in California, the thing attacked her heart and it ruptured and she died from it. You know? And the Delta variant is being studied right now in India, where it started, because scientists and doctors want to see if there's a link between Delta, blood clots, and gangrene, and also see if there's a link between Delta and hearing loss. And then there's another thing, too, the loss of taste and smell, which I've heard about from some people who've gotten it, including people who've sounded off in my comments. They haven't been able to taste anything for months, or smell anything for months. You know, I've often wondered about that. I'm a fat guy. Would I be better off not being able to taste anything? So I just eat diet food. I can't taste anything. It doesn't matter. I just keep myself alive until the cravings go away and I lose a ton of weight. I've wondered about that, but I don't want to get COVID to have to figure that out. But here's the thing. The reason why those happen, I was listening to some doctors talking about this. The reason why you lose those senses is because the virus goes after and munches on nerve connections in your brain and eventually damages them. Well, if this thing can make you lose your sense of taste and smell, how far away are we from a variant mutating into existence that could take away your sight? If we're talking hearing loss now, when are we going to see what Greek letter is going to be tacked onto the variant that can attack the nerve endings that go to your eyes and make you go blind from this thing? That's something that's a very serious thing we got to think about here and, you know, leave on the table, even though it's just speculation. Could a future variant have something like that? Because, I mean, one of the things with COVID-19 that has bothered myself and other folks so much is every time we think we have this thing figured out, it does something completely different. It's crazy. So at this point, if I can think of it, they're just like that rule about the depravity of humanity. If you can imagine it, someone out there is probably trying to do it, whether no matter how sick or twisted it is. That's why we have law enforcement, and that's why shocking stories are going to exist on the rules. You're going to find out about wacko people out there that are doing wacko stuff, or maybe just saying wacko stuff that bothers you. You're going to, so I'm going to adapt this. If I can imagine it, there's probably a mutation that will probably do it at some point. Who knows with this damn thing? That's why we got to take it down. That's why we have to get vaccinated and stop the spread of this thing, contain it. Worldwide, we got to supply vaccines to countries that have trouble getting or making them. Because this is everybody's issue here, worldwide. It's a global pandemic. It has global ramifications. And even if we solve the problems for developed countries, any trade we do everywhere else in the world is going to be affected by this. So, folks, how long do you want the shortages of various things you like to buy to continue? Because factories keep getting locked down and not being able to produce anything in parts of the world that don't have the vaccine technology that we have. We're all connected in this thing. I mean, a week or two ago, I was reading about Vietnam being put into lockdown. And guess what? When China had to go into lockdown last year, there were multinationals that moved industrial production from China to Vietnam. And oh, whoops, Delta went over the border into Vietnam from India. Oops. I mean, a disaster in a part of the world where there's a concentration of manufacturing capacity can cause worldwide problems for that industry. Classic example, 10 years ago, 2011. The Thailand floods. The reason why I got into solid state drives, ladies and gentlemen, the Thailand floods knocked out much of the world's hard drive manufacturing capacity. The price of mechanical hard drives soared. More so than with the current parts shortages. You're talking like, if your hard drive conked out, you're probably paying double the price to get it repaired. Or to get it replaced, excuse me. You don't repair a dead hard drive unless you spend a ton of money for clean room data recovery or something. But yeah, 2011. I bought my first SSD in 2011 because hard drives were expensive. And I was like, you know what? Since the cheap storage is now expensive, let's just try the expensive storage and see how much better it is. 160 gig hard drive, $270 in 2011. But I liked it as a system drive, and I never looked back. I paid those premiums until the cost of solid-state drives came down. So, that's one way I turned lemons into lemonade, but that didn't, of course, mean that we didn't have problems with hard drives being way too expensive for what they were. And then as the industry scrambled to get back up to speed, there were quality issues. So hard drives that used to have 5-year warranties or 3-year warranties would now have 1-year warranties. Because the companies were scrambling to start making them again after recovering the factories from the floods. So, folks, it's a connected world out there, whether we like it or not. The things that we like here in America, if they're from anywhere else in the world, the supply chain issues will affect them. Wars will affect them. A ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal will affect them. This pandemic is going to affect things if we don't get this vaccine out to other parts of the world. Now, we as America, the EU, anywhere who develop this stuff should be part of the solution, not part of the problem. If we don't let other parts of the world in on all of this stuff we're developing, we're part of the problem instead of part of the solution. That's not the way we want to be if we want trade to flourish and things to not cost a bunch of money every other year because of shortages. So, whether we like it or not, we're all in this together. Now let's take a look at this county map. So with that in mind, keep in mind that these risk levels are based on things like infections per 100K. But these are all numbers. And numbers fundamentally suffer from one major weakness. They're inherently collective. And they're arcane at the same time. Numbers don't mean as much as what's in them. It is at least as important to know what's in your numbers as it is to know the number themselves. Let's take a look at Connecticut. Put the risk levels on screen here. Let's take a look at Connecticut on COVID Act Now. I've got Connecticut and Missouri loaded up as two big examples. So, Connecticut right now is at 1.6 per 100K for infection. So, on average, there's 1.6 new cases per 100,000 residents. The infection rate is 0.89, so below 1. So, the virus is losing ground in this state. Every person on average is infecting less than one other person. So, these are averages. They're not absolutes. You, as an individual, are an absolute. But neither the numbers nor what the politicians say, like President Biden, Governor Lamont, etc., neither of those deal in absolutes. They deal in averages. They're collective. They deal with the community. In Missouri, everything looks like this. Drop the vaccination and look at where Delta's ripping everything up. 12.2, 1.15. The virus is gaining ground in Missouri. So, but regardless, both of these states have the exact same problem. These are collective numbers and they're averages. They may not apply to your specific situation. Hence the discussion and the rule of thumb in the title. I mentioned two rules. You don't know who has this thing. You don't know what this thing's going to do to you. Now, there's only one rule. Wrong person, wrong. Well, the other two rules still apply, but if you're unvaccinated, wrong person, wrong place, wrong time, COVID. It doesn't matter whether you're in Connecticut or whether you're in Missouri. It doesn't matter whether your daily new cases statewide are 1.6 or 12.2. It doesn't matter if you're in a green county like that one in Connecticut right there, or in one of the red counties in Missouri. How many people does it take to give you this thing? One. The wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time, you get exposed, you got it. Whether you live in a state like Connecticut or whether you live in a state like Missouri. That's what the nature of these numbers gets away from, is their inherent bias towards things, towards the collective side of things. Just like the politicians talking about this stuff. They tend to bias away from what it means for you as an individual. Politicians will very gladly brag, like in highly vaccinated states like Connecticut, that the numbers have come down thanks to the vaccine. We can, stop wearing masks as much, We can still do all this. We can do all kinds of good stuff this summer. Until Delta starts ripping this state up in wherever it can or whatever. I don't know if it will or where, but what matters is where it will. Won't be as big and widespread maybe as a state like Missouri, but I've been skeptical of what politicians say about this thing the whole way through for one very simple reason. The politicians are trying to do their job. They're trying to be popular and they're trying to get reelected. So, the main way you do that as a politician is by keeping the hospital system working. So you make sure there's ICU capacity in case there's another surge of infections. You don't overload the hospitals. None of this has anything to do with you specifically if you get COVID and need to be put on a ventilator. None. And furthermore, none of this even touches on the ongoing problem with the cost of healthcare in America. If you wind up with an inpatient hospital bill because of COVID treatments, how much is that going to cost? So it's not just about some philosophy or some argument or whether or not you want to wear a mask. It's about the simple matter of your choice is between, if you get the thing and wind up hospitalized for it, fighting that out with your insurance company or not. And how about in this post-vaccine world where we have a vaccine now? I looked at the subsidized cost of the two Moderna shots that I got. $40 each. I would have paid $80 out of pocket for that technology. If that was the price, I would have paid it like that. Out of pocket, no insurance, no issue. It's just a bonus that to get the vaccine out there and gain the collective benefits, which politicians often focus on. It was a thing that politicians pushed for, to not have it be this elitist thing that only the rich and powerful could get vaccinated. They wanted to make this thing available to everybody. So it was a nice bonus that the shots were free, but with a $40 per dose cost, I could have paid for that out of pocket and very easily budgeted for it. And I think it would have been worth it. Like an internet bill for, lessened or no symptoms of COVID if I even get it in the first place. That would have been more than a fair trade-off. However, in this post-vaccine world, if you snub the vaccine, and you end up in the hospital, what kind of situation do you think that's going to be with you and your insurance company? Especially when some of the snootier insurance companies out there will hire private investigators to look at your social media, where you going, da-da-da. I've heard about it with workers' comp claims. But when the claims adjuster finds out that you were saying a bunch of anti-vax stuff on Facebook and your attitude is very clearly, I'm never getting this thing, and instead of subsidizing $80 in shots for a 2-dose mRNA, you now have an inpatient hospital bill that you're trying to claim. Right. Aren't insurance companies enough of a pain in the neck as it is? And, with this thing where they punish people for actually using the product they're paying money for. Aren't they enough of a pain in the neck without throwing this into the equation? So that's the thing. All the people arguing on the internet, the vaccine, is it a government thing? Is it, are they testing it now? Are they trying to control us? Well, think outside the internet argument arena for a second here. Just look at regular life. You have the option here of, you don't know if you might end up with a huge bill because of this. Would you take a chance at not having to deal with that? Especially if it helped with public health and stuff like that. That's the thing, and that's what the people arguing don't want to think about. And just like the people that want to interpret the numbers as something other than collective don't want to think about the fact that no matter where you live, state with Delta running amok because there's not a lot of vaccinations, or Vermont, the most vaccinated state in the country, it only takes one person to get you infected, the person that gives it to you. Regardless, it's a matter of how many of those people there are and where you'll find them. But if that answer isn't 0, there is still somebody out there that can get you infected. So, wrong person, wrong place, wrong time, COVID. And if you get this thing and you live somewhere where people are like, oh, the numbers are low, woo, and stuff like that, it's going to make you feel even more like an ass. I mean, it'd be one thing if you had a real serious case of this crap in the middle of the huge wave last winter when the entire country turned red on the maps. But now you have these people talking about, yeah, we can get rid of the masks now. Yeah. And you still wind up with it because you're not vaccinated. How embarrassing is that going to be? And let's talk about the countermeasures, too. We've talked about this before. We'll talk about it again because things are changing. Again, because you've got the CDC and everybody declaring victory in some way, shape, or form. They say they don't want to, but if you tell people we can use the honor code for masks now, no, you need to learn a few more things about the worst of people's attitudes in society. But anyways, Delta making the rounds will expose that real quick. You just don't want to be one of the people who looks like one of them. yeah, I'm vaccinated. I'm not wearing a mask. Yeah, little do they know. Oh, wait, crap, you got Delta. Shoot. Uh-oh. Yeah. It's going to get ugly. It's going to get ugly, but the truth is going to come to light here. It's just... That's, ladies and gentlemen, is the world that we live in with all of this going on. It's... wrong place, wrong time, wrong person, boom. So that's the thing. Let's go back to these county maps as well. Maybe even invoke the state map for this sort of stuff. Let's get out of this Missouri thing, and let's go back to the national map. So, let's say you live in Massachusetts, which has a lot of green in it. You live in Massachusetts, you have a lot of green in it. Okay, so among the residents of the state of Massachusetts, another one of the most vaccinated states in the country, you see a lot of green. Maybe you do okay with the residents of Massachusetts. But like we just got done saying a couple of minutes ago, it's a very connected world out there. So among the residents of Massachusetts, you have a lot of people vaccinated, a lot of dead ends for the virus. So But what if you have a long-haul truck driver with some anti-vaxxer friends in Massachusetts or something who's coming over from Missouri or from Indiana or from maybe even from New Mexico? You hang out anywhere near an interstate, you're going to see a lot of different license plates on big rigs. Oh, that's the thing. We're connected. What if there's a lot of anti-vaxxers in the western tip of Massachusetts in the Berkshires? Okay, for some reason, they come down and we see something here, maybe here, or one of them takes a road trip out to Providence or something, and something happens there. Excuse me. This thing does not know political boundaries like our states. That's why we're looking at the county map. But even the county map, I wish there was a way, the state of Connecticut has this on the Department of Health's website. You can see the individual towns, but there's an activity floor. They need at least 5 cases in order to light up on the map. Flat. So it's cases per 100K, but you need at least 5 cases in a week to light the towns up. I'm curious what this would look like if we go down to the town level. I'm sure it would be a mess, and you'd have to zoom in on everything, but it'd be interesting to see if counties had like anti-vaxxer towns that were throwing off their averages, which is what a lot of these numbers are, is averages and stuff. And in some parts of the country that look like they're bleeding on this chart, the averages are pretty awful. But it's all connected, You could have truck drivers driving all across the interstates, the 1-week incubation period, so maybe they caught it from around here somewhere, made a couple deliveries here, here, and here, and don't realize they're infected until they're going home. They drive sleeper cabs or something, and now they have to end up in a hospital somewhere around here. It's a connected world. It's a connected world. We don't have people saying, show your papers, every single state, and, we're no matter what people say about the government, it's not super omnipotent with surveillance. So there are ways to be in risky situations and not know it. That's why there's been such a huge emphasis on contact tracing, because we needed to ramp that up. Okay, who's this person been in contact with? If they get infected, and they'll notify those people. You were in direct contact with blah, blah, blah. Now, how do we go about all of that? So no matter what the numbers are, it still only takes that one person to infect you if you're not vaccinated. It takes that one person that doesn't know they have Delta. That's the issue here. So whether you're in southwestern Missouri, somewhere in California, how about Nevada, who had some Delta show up around Reno, and even Las Vegas. May not be turning any counties red, but if it's taking counties back in the other direction and turning them orange, it's a matter of where this thing is. Now, of course, we're not dumb. When people are identified, they can be quarantined and things like that. They can be treated after the fact. The wild card of this thing is that incubation period. Where the heck did it go before we found out what was going on? And so that's the thing. You want to be a dead-end street. You want to be a dead-end street to this thing. So there's where the vaccine comes into play, because there's just so much of this crap that we don't know that could come back to hurt us. That's the issue here. So yeah, no matter what the numbers, whether you live in Massachusetts or Missouri, or Vermont and Missouri, which look at Vermont. Southern Vermont is gold. Northern Vermont is green. So green state overall, but there's parts where there's more activity going on. I'm curious what the southwestern tip of Vermont is like with what's going on in the Berkshire County in Massachusetts. That's the thing. There was a columnist. She was someone with a high IQ, and she would answer questions like, I'm smart, let me answer all your questions. People would write into a local newspaper, whatever it was. Someone wrote in one day and they said, hey, I'm flying in a plane soon. Do I want to be in a 1-engine plane or a 2-engine plane? Which one is safer in terms of the plane not going down? Her response was, if an engine fails on a 1-engine plane, the plane goes down. If either engine fails in a 2-engine plane, plane goes down. But now there's 2 engines to maintain and everything. So either way, it still takes only 1 engine failing to take the plane down. So she said, with that logic, it doesn't really make a difference. It's about, do you want to be on a plane with a screaming baby or between 2 screaming babies? Doesn't matter. You still got a screaming baby who's bothering you the whole way through. So in a sense, that's why knowing what's in the numbers and what's not in these numbers is so important with this kind of thing, because there are states that are doing better than others. with the local populations. But people go to other states for things all the time. Trucking, warehousing, employment, blah, blah, blah. Some of this is pretty long, too. You have people that fly around the country. What if you work a job, you're not vaccinated, and you're working a job that has you jumping on planes every other day? So you can go to like 4 or 5 different parts of the country in the span of the incubation period before finding out you have COVID. That's what I mean. It's just the numbers, yeah, are the numbers. It's nice to see the states where there's more vaccinations and things are coming down and things like that. It's nice to see that we have a really powerful countermeasure against this thing. And I'm sure that, of course, between politicians, private industry, and good old American capitalism, we're going to want to stay on top of this thing as new variants emerge. So, there might be something that evades current vaccines. Yeah, well, if you pay attention to what the companies are trying to develop right now, first off, for people that are nervous about needles, there are companies in this world like Bharat Biotech in India that are trying to develop nasal spray vaccines so you don't have to take a needle in the arm. There's also Moderna working on a shot, working on a booster for variants or whatnot, testing things like that. You'll see very familiar names in the phase 1 and 2 trials if you look at the Global Vaccine Alliance's website to see what they're working on in terms of boosters to cover other variants or to improve protection against other variants, or if they see a pattern with how the variants are developing, maybe try and protect against more future variants. But hey, this is a war, and we got to fight this thing to win. Now, the enemy may be microscopic, but it is still an enemy. So, but in the midst of all of this, we got to remember it still only takes that one person. The question is, where are you going to encounter that one person? Missouri in general, that southwestern corner, there are some counties in that southwestern corner that before all of this happened, like 10% of the people were fully vaccinated. That's it. People weren't going for the shots. And then this isn't the thing with Delta too, is that if you remember the coverage, the news coverage from a couple of months ago, there was a study talking about 1 dose of Pfizer Moderna doing really well against the original version of this thing. So, and then people were like, well, maybe I don't need the second dose. And then another variant comes along that's better with 2 doses. And oh, whoops. Yeah. So follow your doctor's orders, people. It's like, the UK can tell you some stuff about that with what's happened over there. Get everyone first dosed as much as possible. Let's wait on the second dose for oh crap. Yeah, one of those. Right. But that's the world we live in, ladies and gentlemen. That's the world we live in. No matter what numbers people throw around, no matter what they get to in your area, it still only takes that one person to get you infected and you don't know who it is. That's why you want to get this. That's why you want to get your shots and get the ball rolling on them as soon as possible this summer. Because if it's Moderna, you're talking like 6 weeks. Let's see, we're heading into July right now, so you head to August. You head to August and mid-August or so. So you don't want to wait if you think there's going to be something nasty going on this autumn when people start getting forced indoors. Kids go back to school. Kids don't inherently like to be super clean about things. Maybe they don't want to keep their masks on in school either. When I was growing up, the kids that got suspended all the time were flicking spitballs at people in class. It's like nowadays you probably can get in the same boat by being the bratty kid that won't keep their mask on, but either way, you're still talking about something gross. It's just like, if you think anything's going to happen at all when the schools open back up, get going on it now. Don't wait. Whatever you want to do. And like I said last time, there's 3 groups of people out there. There's the people that are vaccinated. You have the people that can't be vaccinated due to medical conditions. Those are the people that should be sheltering in place and being extremely careful. And then you have the people that are the subject of all the Darwin jokes that are going around right now. The people that are being snooty about it. Right. If you're one of those people that's snubbing the technology, well, you talk a lot about choices and medical choice. Yeah, well, choices have consequences. So, I don't want to be an insensitive clod about this crap. But I figured there would eventually be a variant that would come along that would do what Delta's doing right now and Delta Plus is doing right now. So, fundamentally, considering all the bullying that's going on the internet about this stuff right now, follow like local news on Facebook or something to see it for yourself. With all the bullying that's going on the internet right now, Now, everybody's going to basically get the results of their choices from this. If people can complain, or even people in mainstream media can be like, oh my goodness, there's two realities emerging because of this darn vaccine. Yes, choices have consequences. You know, choices have consequences. You have a situation where what we have right now stops some of these newer variants in their tracks, which is cool because they were developed for the OG version of this thing. So, you know, the success rates and the efficacy that we're seeing towards the variants is really cool. It's a cool bonus to this. But it's not like the folks that make these things aren't already scrambling to work on what's next, because that's already in play as well. But that's the thing. Now, behind all of this, no matter what you think, whether you think it's some kind of control mechanism or whatever, some political machine or whatever, at these companies making these shots, those are people going to work trying to do what they wanted to do, you know? They want to do this as a career. They're going to work, putting in some good, honest work to make something that's good for society like this. So, and it's the big countermeasure that we were missing when we were all running around with masks last year. We may have to put the masks, well, I don't know how the masks are ever going to work well again. That's the problem, because of that stupid honor code thing. Oh boy. Here's the thing. The reason why masks did anything at all is because of compliance. The more compliance you have, the better they worked. I always said before, in the pre-vaccine days, that the attitude of your workforce, your friends, your family, etc., you know, versus this darn thing, you were only as strong as whoever had the worst attitude about it. So in the workforce, it was whoever had the worst attitude about wearing masks and, you know, being careful with this thing. So you have the anti-vaxxer on the team. They don't care. They're not wearing masks. They're not being careful at all. Maybe they're one of those unlucky people who got infected, recovered, natural immunity. But then they got reinfected again like months later. And then there we go again. Well, you know, maybe you had someone like that, but that's the thing. With the way this thing is, that person was the risk for the big risk for the team. So that person was the big risk for the team when we didn't have any other way of dealing with this thing. But if you had people that were more like, yeah, wearing masks, they were careful, more social distancing, or you worked on a less popular shift like me, so there was some social distancing baked in because there were less people in the building, you know, you had that kind of stuff going on, but the only reason it worked was compliance. The more places that could make you keep your mask on, the better they worked. In an environment where I had to go to I had to go to a medical thing today. I had to go to a doctor's appointment today. So I had to wear a mask there. So I got plenty of them. Just toss one back on. No issue. I'll look like a ninja again at the drop of a hat. Woo! A little bit different putting those on. I haven't worn them as much as I used to because I'm fully vaccinated. But I got out of there. I was like, I'm going to Walmart. Yeah, I better keep this thing handy. Because even if it's not, even if, you know, fully vaccinated and stuff like that, it's Walmart we're talking about. There's people at Walmart. The blog isn't just a spoof. It can be a thing and things like that. And I've run into people at this Walmart that didn't know what deodorant was, and they stunk the place up from like 30 feet away. I'm like, I think I'll wear the masks because of that. Plus, I was cashing in cans, so probably going to the filthiest part of the store. With the way bottle machines are never cleaned these days. Or if they are, it never looks it. If they are, it never looks it. So, howdy, what's going on? So, here's the thing, though. I was the only one in the store, other than a handful of other people wearing the masks. So, far less people are wearing them in many situations. So I wouldn't put any stock in masks or double masking anymore, because people have been given an excuse, especially with the way corporate America is handling this. They're not going to accost customers for the most part. They're not going to ask personal medical questions if everybody goes through the store. They're focusing more on their own workforce and trying to get them vaccinated because it's a cost thing. When you have people who can't be productive because they're knocked flat on their back for 2 weeks by this thing. Even if they recover from it and have no long-lasting ill effects afterwards, that's still 2 weeks you have an empty spot on the team and not as much stuff can get done. Or what if they know some really important stuff? Oh, that could be a problem. So yeah, big surprise, businesses are focusing on their bottom line, their fiduciary duty, their workforce, more so than the customers. And that's the exact pattern. So people have been given their excuse and they are running with it. We have some anti-vaxxer around here who would love nothing more than to lie about being vaccinated, if they're even confronted at all, to never have to wear a mask ever again. They're going to do it. And I know they're going to do it. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to get fully vaccinated. I knew this crap was coming, and here we are. You know, I'm just curious how many people are going to get outed if Delta comes to this neck of the woods, or maybe it's here and, you know, it just hasn't really taken, you know, gotten some traction yet. It's just, what's going to happen when Delta, I mean, we look at what's going on in Missouri right now, and Missouri's the sneak preview. Where else is this thing going to go? It's been interesting, back to the map. It's been interesting when I see a splotch of red on this thing, and I can Google search in some cases and find stories about Delta outbreaks. Southwestern Missouri was the first one, but I imagine that's how I found out about Guadalupe County, New Mexico. So I probably could do some digging and find stories about Delta issues in anywhere else that's red or going in the wrong direction on this map. So we're getting a sneak preview of what it's going to look like when this stuff comes to your neck of the woods. It's like I said before. It's like, if you ever heard of crimes of opportunity, where there's a wave of like car break-ins or something in your town and the police investigate them, and then they jump on the local news and they're like, there are a lot of idiots that are leaving their doors unlocked. Lock your darn doors, idiots. Well, not without saying that specifically, but that's probably what they're thinking. There's a bunch of idiots didn't lock their doors. That's why their cars got broken into. That's basically what we're doing. We're dealing with a microscopic version of this thing. Anywhere it can go, it's going to go. And that's probably going to be among the people that are not vaccinated. It's not a scare tactic. It's just this thing, bada bing, is going to do what it's going to do. That's why we've wanted countermeasures against this. And the one big one we didn't have until recently was a vaccine. So, you know, if there is some long-term side effect that I don't know about that's going to take me out, at least I'll be taken out doing the right thing here. Like, what kind of attitude is that? Yeah, well, this past week, I saw some folks get very, very guffawed on social media because they're like, hey, you know, I made my choice. If I die, I die. And then a bunch of people are like, I'm taking this to Reddit. So the internet showed up and the internet did its thing. But, you know, it's just knowing people the way that I do. I pretty much know what to expect. At least I think I do when it comes to the worst of the worst. So I like to have pleasant surprises instead of nasty surprises. When right now with the 9-to-5ers, if there is any reason to suspect that you are lying about your vaccination status, that can get called into HR through the ethics hotline, corporate, who will then initiate an investigation and you will have to provide evidence of being vaccinated. Otherwise, could be consequences up to and including termination. So there's a hard count. If somebody is spouting anti-vax rhetoric on Facebook and someone screenies it and sends it to HR, you know, and they're not wearing their mask because they're lying about being vaccinated. Yeah, that's the thing. But aside from that, that harsh policy to make sure, you know, it's an ethics issue if you ever lie about your vaccination status. It's been nice seeing the people not wearing masks because they got their shots. Some of which came and say, yeah, I got Pfizer, I got Moderna, I got J&J. Like, yeah, this wasn't so bad, just a little arm pain. It's been nice seeing all the people, you know, remove masks and stuff because they're fully vaccinated now and they self-certify that they are. So it's been nice seeing that. It's been a pleasant surprise. I thought there would be less of them, but at this point, the people that are still wearing masks are people I expected would still be wearing masks. So it doesn't surprise me at all, but it's just nice to see all these people that went out and got their shots. It's a thing that didn't exist a year ago, folks. It exists now, and the big issue is balancing out. The big issue here is to balance out any nervousness you might have about this thing versus the numbers, a little something called statistical significance in terms of how often more adverse side effects happen, your own personal medical history, which you want to talk about with your doctor, by the way. But the reason I'm so gung-ho about the vaccines is because it's technology. It's especially mRNA. mRNA has been being researched for decades, and it just happened it just so happened that we got lucky with something becoming viable for this. So now there's a logistical advantage versus the old school way of doing this, where you have to engineer a neutered virus and then grow it in order to make something. So it's really cool stuff. The nerd in me just lights up at what mRNA is capable of doing. And being from New England, of course, I wanted, Moderna's based out of Massachusetts. Cool. Support local New England businesses. Now, some of my reasons for doing what I did are not very scientific at all. It's just, I'm a nerd. This is the sort of stuff I get into. But with Delta, though, and with whatever comes after Delta, we are basically looking at a war against a microscopic enemy here. I mean, look at this dumb thing. It's just like, it's evolved. And it's like, try this. Yeah, well, it's all about fighting a good fight, isn't it? And I don't mean against each other. But that's the thing. This is the summer to get your stuff together. If you want to get vaccinated, this is the summer to do it, because you don't want to be scrambling when autumn rolls around, particularly when the kids go back to school. That's the issue. Maybe if, Johnson & Johnson, people studying that, see how that stacks up with mRNA. You can get fully vaccinated in 2 weeks instead of 6 or 4 or something like that. Cool, but you just don't want to be a nervous wreck because you're like, oh, I'm not there yet, and I started too late. That's really the thing you want to look for with this stuff. If you in any way you're thinking maybe you might want to get something, go get it, because the summer is kind of like that last summer. I have to explain that part. My family, my grandfather had a tradition when my dad, my aunts, my uncles, and folks grew up, that they could stay rent-free at the house one last summer after they graduated high school, and then they had to start paying board. So the idea, you got to be a mature adult, you got to support yourself, so you can have one last summer because you graduated high school, have one last summer vacation, have some fun. When autumn rolls around, you're getting a job if you're still here. That's a perfectly responsible thing to do. I got a feeling, though, that this is kind of a last summer in terms of Delta. We just got to watch where it goes. Keep an eye on covidactnow.org or local state maps as well, if there's towns that light up when they have issues. And of course, the CDC has one as well, but it's not as colorful. So this one I like. I like the color scale and everything. It also shows, there's one that shows how the vaccine adoption rate in various parts of the country. The idea here is, though, I don't want to be Mr. Stuck-up vaccine nut here and be like, ha, Missouri's got lower numbers, so you're getting ripped up. I mean, I don't need to throw emotion behind this. It's just the sort of thing. We know what this thing does. We knew it would, it does things based on opportunity. It goes for the easy mark, and the way to be an easy mark is to have no defense against this thing. Or for some internal academic, intellectual, rhetorical reason, have no defense against this thing. That's something that, I've dabbled in conservatism before. I've dabbled in being a Republican before. I've dabbled in libertarianism before. I've even liked the Constitution Party before, in terms of the constitutional limits on government power in this country. But one thing I kept running into is this idea that rhetoric has to replace something we can see for ourselves in the outside world, or see through ourselves through numbers, or see through ourselves through being able to look and see where there's problems with cases or what. Or how about in Missouri with the wastewater testing, where sewage plants, because the original COVID shedding, people shed the virus in their, number ones and number twos before they develop symptoms. So it'll show up in the wastewater sometimes before it shows up in the community. And so there's scientists out there that they're taking samples of toilet water, so to speak, when it gets to the wastewater plant, and they're trying, oh, is this here? Is this that there? Is this variant here? Is that variant there? So, I mean, it's all just stuff that's been happening. I mean, you can like it, you can hate it, but it's happening. And the question is, what side of this do you want to be on? Do you want to try and mask like crazy, like some people I know who don't want to get the vaccine are doing? I'll just keep wearing a bazillion masks. So now they like masks, and they want to wear a ton of masks at a time when they're going to be less effective because what made them work in the first place is being dialed way back. Less business restrictions, less lockdowns, less capacity limits, things along those lines. So now they want to get into the old way of doing things. That's the thing. That's the thing that doesn't add up here. The other big one to keep an eye on, like I've been saying, is extra sanitation. That's a cost. Businesses have to hire people and they have to tie them up sanitizing surfaces. If you get to a point where a certain critical mass in an area is vaccinated, that gets cut. Now we're back to the world being as filthy or dirty as it was before the pandemic. So that's another pre-vaccine countermeasure that goes away, or is lessened in terms of its impact. Bottom line, it's 2021, not 2020. Things are going to change. And quite frankly, you can be as distrustful of politicians as you want. I understand where you're coming from, because I've watched Governor Lamont here in Connecticut focus heavily on the collective side of things, flattening the curve, keeping the hospitals running, not having to resort to triaging care. But it doesn't say anything about your individual situation. If you end up with a hospital bill when you could have gotten shots instead, and now you're fighting with the insurance company because of it, especially if they can produce evidence that you snubbed the vaccine and wound up in the hospital afterwards. That's the kind of situation that I wonder about, especially with how wacko insurance companies can be. So, but I've been keeping an eye on the way politicians have been talking about this. I've been noticing how they frame certain things. Even President Biden. Guys, I played the Youngblood 60s song, come on, people now, finally get together, gotta love one another, because I have this guy's going to be a total hippie of a president when President Biden was elected. This guy, let's play some hippie music, Biden won, woo! But now he gets on camera. President Biden gets on camera, and he's like this. Come on, get your COVID vaccine. It's free. We can do this. It's really too bad that in less vaccinated parts of the country, there's going to be problems with these variants like Delta. Oh, that's a nice way of putting it. Probably because it wouldn't make you look like too compassionate of a politician to say it's going to be a COVIDiot plague. I don't need no friggin' jab. Oh, crap. What's this cough I'm getting? Yeah, look, it's going to be the results of bad decisions. There's an old George Jones song about that, living and dying with the choices I've made. I hate when stuff gains some morbid, relevance like this, but that's the issue here. So do your digging on this one, folks. Watch the numbers and watch where this thing goes, and watch how people track it, too, like the wastewater project in Missouri. I'm actually thinking of taking this off of YouTube and watching it on Facebook through local media in the Springfield area, if they have Facebook pages. Because I know that in my neck of the woods in Connecticut, there are some folks there are some organizations, even television channels, that do more on Facebook than on YouTube. Plus, YouTube has stacked their algorithms so that it's very hard to find stuff besides national media on stories about all of this. So in order to combat the spread of misinformation, but I would like to see people acting like wacko anti-vaxxers from time to time, so that I can be glad that I philosophically don't keep company with that stuff. I don't know. I don't know if the ivory tower people at YouTube sometimes think about, maybe it might be good to let some people out themselves as, oh, that person's completely off their rocker. Well, I know what that looks like. Just like on Facebook, all these people They're using their names and their pictures, and some of them don't even have the privacy settings set to where, so you can mouse over and see, oh, that person lives in this town and works at that place. Cool. I'm staying away from that town because obviously things are crazy over there, and I'm never working at that place they work at because look at who they hire. And people don't realize what Facebook makes them look like sometimes. It's all right. One last thing before we call it with this hour-long plus discussion about this, which I don't want discussions about the pandemic to take over the channel. It's just this is that piece of chewing gum that the more you chew on it, and the bigger it gets. It's just all right. Let's talk about natural immunity and what Rand Paul has been talking about. He has a point about natural immunity if it's good. Here's the problem. There's multiple variants of this darn thing going around. And there's multiple levels of symptoms, multiple immune responses. Some of the crazier things that COVID has done to people is because someone's immune system went totally haywire. So someone's immune system went completely off its rocker trying to deal with this thing. So I'll just tell you this. With natural immunity, the big issue with getting antibodies after being infected is that what do you have? That's the thing. It can't be engineered as well. Can't be engineered at all, actually. And so you got to wonder what it is that you have. And it's a giant question mark as opposed to getting a shot where we know it's a viral vector or an mRNA. We know it's this, we know it's that. We have something standardized we can keep an eye on. Okay, this variant came out, these shots were effective against it, those weren't, blah, blah, blah. But even without going to all that detail, part of what makes vaccines work is their ability to provoke an appropriate level of immune response. They have to do their jobs. See, if you have a choice between getting something, going through all the crap you have to go through to get to hopefully recover from it, or having a modified version of the virus that can't replicate to train your immune system, the modified version that we're going to spend all the time manufacturing and stuff needs to be worth taking. And that's where, if you dig around the Global Vaccine Alliance, Gavi.org, look up the COVID-19 vaccine race. Go to phase 1, scroll to the bottom. Go to phase 1 and scroll to the bottom, and you'll see the abandoned vaccine attempts. 2 of them were by Merck, large company just like Pfizer when it comes to pharmaceuticals and stuff. Both of the failed Merck vaccines that never made it out of trials. Part of the notes on them were that the immune response they provoked was actually less than that of getting than getting a regular infection. So it was crappier compared to getting it the regular way. So yeah, they were crappy. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. So the stuff that made it to market was known for a robust immune response. And that's where those numbers like efficacy and other things, that's what it's all tied to as well. The thing has to do its job to an adequate amount. We don't want something that D-minuses or flunks here. Now, we know that with a wide range of symptoms, including people that are asymptomatic, that COVID affects different people in different ways. So like, oh yeah, well, what about natural immunity? You don't know. You don't know what you're getting when you get it. And that's why you got to talk with your doctor about this. You might need to have some tests done to see, can you just do 1 dose of an mRNA and get as good as the people that did 2 doses or something? It's a variable. That's the thing. And anything variable is something you got to wonder about. That's the thing. I mean, there might be some people, they've never had a problem since recovering. And I'd say they're lucky at that one. But at the same time, there's people like my cousin who got infected twice last year. Infected once, and boy, how does this sound for a way to spend 2020 in the pre-vaccine era? Infected once because she works in healthcare. She has some COVID patients that she caught this thing from. Knocked flat on her back by this thing. Holy crap, had to use a CPAP just to not need oxygen. If you can imagine a CPAP, there's sleep apnea, pumps air into you so you keep your breathing passages open while you sleep. You usually would wear that at night. She was wearing it all day. She was wearing it 24/7, just keep breathing okay. Recovered, wound up with post-COVID pneumonia that sent her back to the hospital. So complications after recovery, got back somewhat to normal, eventually came down with it again, and had a round 2 with it. So that's the thing. Bottom line is, if natural immunity, like Rand Paul talks about, was good enough, we wouldn't even bother trying to make any vaccines or anything. But it's not always the best thing. My own experience with chickenpox is a great example of that. I got chickenpox before there was a vaccine. Now I'm at risk for shingles. So if it was available, it would have been nice if I could have skipped the risk of a very painful reactivation of the chickenpox virus later in life. But I'm stuck with where I am because the stuff wasn't available at the time. So, yeah. So that's the thing. If natural immunity was the answer to everything, we wouldn't even bother with this stuff. There was a need for something better. There was a need for something that we could be more sure of than, what kind of immune response did you get based on your symptoms or whatever. There was how robust was your response? And there are some vaccines that did not make it onto the market and are failed vaccines that never made it out of testing because they didn't do their job well enough. So if that amount of variability will get products abandoned in terms of development and turned into a sunk cost for a company like Merck, why do we want to roll the dice on something like how bad did you have COVID before you recovered from it, and how long is that immunity going to last, and how does it do versus variants? There's doctors out there that are far more qualified to talk about this than I am. People in Los Angeles, for example, are studying the effects of natural immunity and seeing its inconsistencies and stuff. But with the other stuff we have, with the vaccines, we pretty much know what they are. It's just a matter of the doctor needs to know based on your past medical history and stuff like that, whether you might, what kind of response you'll get and whether it'll be robust enough to justify it. So it is something to talk with your doctor about. In the meantime, this discussion was prompted by the rise of Delta. So now we got to get through whatever Delta is going to do. So keep an eye on stuff like this and see where it goes. But also keep an eye on yourself, because it's just, what a punch in the face. That we've got this thing being a pain in the neck. We got this thing going around the less vaccinated parts of the country being a pain in the neck right at the time when we thought we could enjoy a darn summer. Yeah. So, well, here's hoping the future variants, the vaccines are effective against those too. At least the ones we have. I know that it's kind of, around the world, that's not the case. But yeah. We got to keep our head on straight in all of this. But in the meantime, remember what's in the numbers that you look at. Yes, I'm from Connecticut. There's more people that are vaccinated in this state. But that doesn't mean I can't be in the wrong place. If I was unvaccinated, I couldn't be in the wrong place at the wrong time with that one person in the entire county that could get me infected with this thing and feel like an ass afterwards. It's just the thing. Sometimes you got to look at the difference between the numbers and you as an individual. Same thing, too, with like occupational safety and OSHA type stuff. All right, you have a TRIR, total recordable incident rate of 2.4 in your facility for manufacturing widgets. How many injuries, how many lost time injuries in the workplace does it take before you are adversely affected? 1. If you injure yourself on industrial equipment, it doesn't matter what the TRIR is. You're the one that's out of work. You're the one that's in pain. You're the one that's on meds. You're the one that's wondering, am I going to have to collect disability the rest of my life? You're the one putting up with all the crap because of one incident. And that's the thing. Things may get better, but until we have our smallpox moment, if you're not vaccinated, wrong person, wrong place, wrong time, COVID. It's ugly, but life can be ugly sometimes, and this is definitely one of those times. God. We could have done better. We could have had a fun summer, yeah, but makes me wonder what the next variant after Delta is going to do if this thing evolves again. This is war. It's just not against it's against a microscopic enemy, but yeah. Sucks. Sheesh. 2019, oh how I miss thee. All right, let's stop this stuff. Let's stop this discussion crap. I've got videos to work on, and I have things that are more related to this channel to stream about. But that's where we're headed for the summer. If you're, talk to your doctor about the COVID vaccines. There's people out there, including people with way more credentials than me, that'll answer questions on all of that. But the timetable of this is such that you're going to want to get this sooner rather than later if there's any chance that Delta might wander into your neck of the woods. What was it? The World Health Organization said it's going to pick people off that are unvaccinated. Wow. What bureaucrat at the World Health Organization plays first-person shooters and is one of those annoying snipers in like a first-person shooter game that, oh, the guy got me. Oh, the guy got me again. Somebody please fire where that guy's camping. Had to throw in a gaming reference at the end of this. Darn it. I got to make myself feel better about this crap somehow. That's our discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay signing off. Thanks for stopping by. Back to the videos.